Elias Carver had lived on his ranch for more than 20 years, long enough to know every corner of the land as if it were part of his own memory. He knew the sound of the wind moving through the tall grass, the slow creak of the wooden gates, and the distant calls of cattle waking at sunrise. His days were quiet, steady, and predictable, just the way he preferred them. He rarely had visitors, and the nearest neighbor lived half a mile away, which meant the ranch was usually calm and undisturbed. But on one cool morning, as the sun rose over the Wyoming fields, that calm broke. Elias had saddled his horse to check an old fence line on the far side of his property. A storm had passed through the night before, and storms often pushed debris across the land, bending old posts or loosening the wire. As he approached the fence, he noticed something unusual. At first, he thought it was a pile of clothes left by hunters who sometimes crossed onto his land without asking. But as he rode closer, he realized it was not a pile of clothes at all. It was a person. His breath caught in his chest. He slid off his horse immediately and hurried forward. The figure lay on the ground near a broken fence post, curled slightly as if cold or frightened. A thin blanket of dust covered the person's clothing, and their hair was tangled from the wind. Elias knelt beside them. It was a woman. He spoke gently, hoping not to frighten her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" There was no answer. Her hands were tied behind her, but the knots looked loose, almost as if they had been tied without strength or purpose. Her face was turned away from him, so he carefully moved to see if she was breathing. Relief washed over him when he noticed her chest rise and fall, though faintly. She was alive, but clearly weak from something. Maybe cold, maybe hunger, maybe fear. Elias hesitated only a moment before untying her hands. The rope felt worn, as if it had been handled too many times. When the last knot came undone, her fingers trembled slightly, signaling she was beginning to wake. He waited patiently, unsure of what she might say or do. Slowly, her eyes opened. They were cloudy at first, confused and unfocused. She looked around, trying to understand where she was, and then her gaze settled on Elias. For a brief moment, she seemed startled, but her expression softened when she realized he was not a threat. Her voice came out as a whisper, dry and shaky. "Untie me, I crave." Then she paused, struggling for breath. "Freedom." Her words felt heavy, filled with something deeper than simple fear. Elias couldn't fully understand what she meant, but he knew she needed help. He gently lifted her into a sitting position and offered her his water canteen. She drank slowly, her hands trembling as if even the simple act required more strength than she had left. After a few minutes, her breathing steadied, and she looked around again, taking in the ranch land, the damaged fence, and the open sky above them. Elias waited, giving her space to gather her thoughts. Finally, she spoke again. "My name is Mara." Her voice was still soft, but clearer now. "I'm Elias," he replied. "You're safe here. Can you tell me what happened?" Mara shook her head slightly, as if not ready to explain. I don't remember everything. I just remember being scared. I remember running." She touched her wrists, seeing the marks from the rope. "I think someone brought me here. Or maybe I wandered here. I'm not sure." Elias could tell she was confused, maybe exhausted to the point where everything felt mixed together. He did not push for more details. Instead, he offered a calm, steady presence. "We can head back to my house," he said gently. "You need food, water, rest. Then you can tell me whatever you're comfortable sharing." Mara nodded slowly, as if the idea of being taken care of was both comforting and surprising. Elias helped her onto the horse, climbing up behind her to make sure she didn't fall. The ride back was quiet. She leaned forward slightly, holding the saddle horn with weak hands. Every now and then, Elias glanced at her, making sure she was still conscious. The ranch house came into view, a small, weathered building with a porch, a rocking chair, and windows that looked out at the endless fields. For most of his life, Elias had walked into that house alone. Today, he carried someone else inside, someone fragile, someone mysterious. He placed Mara on the couch, covered her with a thick wool blanket, and set a glass of water beside her. She looked around the room slowly, her eyes tracing the framed photos on the wall, the books stacked by the fireplace, and the boots lined neatly by the door. "This place feels peaceful," she whispered. "It usually is," Elias replied. "Tell me if you need anything." For a moment, she simply looked at him, as if trying to decide whether she could trust him. Then she gave a small, tired smile. "Thank you." Elias nodded and stepped into the kitchen to warm some soup. While he worked, he kept an ear out for any sign of distress. But Mara remained quiet. When he returned, she accepted the bowl with both hands, sipping slowly. Each swallow seemed to give her back a little more strength. When she finished, she set the bowl aside and leaned back against the couch cushions. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I must look like a mess." "You look like someone who's had a long couple of days," Elias said kindly. "But you're safe now." She looked down at her hands again, rubbing her wrists gently. Then she took a slow breath. "I don't remember how I ended up tied near that fence," she said. "I was alone before that. For a long time. I kept trying to find a way out of something, but I didn't know what. My mind. It feels like pieces of a puzzle that don't fit together yet." Elias studied her expression, the confusion, the sadness, the quiet plea for understanding. She wasn't telling him the whole story, but maybe she didn't know how to yet. "That's all right," he said. "You don't have to explain anything until you're ready. You can rest here tonight, and tomorrow, if you want, we can call the sheriff or a doctor, whatever you need." At the mention of the sheriff, Mara stiffened slightly. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but Elias caught it. It was as if she feared something more than she feared being lost in the middle of nowhere. "No sheriff," she said quickly. "Not yet." Her reaction raised a quiet worry in his chest. There was more to her story, much more, but he didn't push. Not tonight. Instead, he kept the house warm, offered her the guest room, and told her she could lock the door if it made her feel safer. She thanked him again, her voice steadier now, though her eyes still held a shadow of something unspoken. After she disappeared into the guest room, Elias remained in the living room for a long time, staring into the quiet. He had found strangers on his land before, lost hikers, travelers with broken-down cars, but never someone like Mara, never someone whose presence felt wrapped in secrecy, confusion, and unanswered questions. He told himself he would get clearer answers tomorrow, but as he sat alone, listening to the wind outside and the faint creak of the house settling, he felt a strange certainty deep inside. Finding Mara wasn't an accident, and untying her rope was only the beginning of something neither of them understood yet. The next morning arrived quietly on the ranch, as sunlight slipped through the thin curtains in the guest room. Mara woke slowly, still unsure of where she was for a moment. Her mind felt foggy, like someone had shaken her memories and placed them back in the wrong order. She touched her wrists, remembering the loose ropes, remembering the cold ground, and remembering Elias's calm voice telling her she was safe. She sat up and looked around the room. It was simple but welcoming. Soft blankets, wooden furniture, a small lamp, and a window that opened to a wide view of golden fields. The peacefulness felt strange to her, almost unfamiliar, as if her life before had been too full of noise and confusion to ever allow a moment like this. Elias was already awake. She heard the faint sounds of him moving around in the kitchen, probably preparing breakfast. Mara took a deep breath and stood up, trying to steady herself. Her legs felt a little weak, but she forced them to move. She had no idea how long she had been wandering before Elias found her, but her body clearly remembered the struggle even if her mind didn't. When she walked into the kitchen, Elias looked up from the stove and gave her a gentle nod. "Good morning," he said, not too loud, not too soft, just enough to let her know she was welcome. "Good morning," Mara replied, offering a small smile. "I hope I didn't cause too much trouble." "No trouble at all," he said honestly. "How are you feeling today?" She hesitated, unsure how to describe the mix of tiredness and confusion inside her. "A little better," she answered. "Still, trying to understand everything." "That's all right," Elias said. "One step at a time." He placed 2 plates of warm breakfast on the table. Mara sat down carefully. She had eaten the soup last night, but it had been too little to fill her empty stomach. Now, as she tasted the food, she realized just how hungry she had been. Elias didn't rush her or ask questions while she ate. He let the silence settle comfortably between them. When she finally finished, she set her fork down and folded her hands in her lap. Elias poured her a glass of water and then sat across from her, waiting patiently. He didn't want to push her, but he knew she needed to talk eventually, even if she didn't want to. Mara stared at the glass for a long moment before speaking. "I'm trying to remember," she said slowly. "Pieces come to me, but they feel blurry. I remember running. I remember wanting to get away from something, but I can't see it clearly." Elias nodded gently. "It's all right if you don't remember everything yet." "But I should," she whispered. "It feels like I'm forgetting something important." She rubbed her temples lightly. A faint ache throbbed behind her eyes. Elias noticed her discomfort, but he didn't interrupt. He sensed she needed time. After a moment, she added, "I know I wasn't tied the way you might think. The rope was loose. I think maybe I tied myself. Or someone told me to. I'm not sure." Elias felt a light concern, but he stayed calm. "You don't have to explain anything before you're ready." Mara looked at him with quiet appreciation. His steadiness grounded her, made her feel less lost. She sensed she could trust him, even if she didn't fully trust her own memories. "Could we walk outside?" she asked. "Maybe fresh air will help me remember more." Elias nodded. "Of course." They stepped out onto the porch. The morning air was cool and clear, and the sunlight spread across the field in soft gold. Mara inhaled deeply, her chest rising as if her lungs were tasting calmness for the first time in a long while. As she walked beside Elias, she looked around carefully, studying every shape and shadow. The ranch was open and quiet, but there was something about the wide space that made her feel both free and small at the same time. They reached the fence line, the same place where Elias had found her the day before. Mara paused, staring at the broken post and the ground where she had lain. A chill traveled down her spine, not from fear, but from the strange familiarity of the moment. "This is where it happened," she said softly. "I remember waking up. I remember dust. I remember the sky looking too big." She knelt down, touching the dry grass. Elias watched carefully, making sure she didn't feel overwhelmed. Mara traced her fingers over the marks in the dirt, as if trying to follow a trail only she could see. "I don't think someone brought me here," she said. "I think I came on my own." "Do you know why?" Elias asked gently. She shook her head. "Not yet." Elias stood with his hands resting lightly on his belt, his posture relaxed. He didn't want Mara to feel pressured, but he couldn't help feeling a quiet worry. Her confusion wasn't normal. It felt deeper, as if something emotional or mental had caused her memory to break apart. After a moment, Mara stood up. "Can you show me around your ranch? Maybe seeing more places will help." "Sure," Elias said. They spent the next hour walking through the grazing fields, the barn, and the small dirt road leading back to the house. Mara asked questions about the animals, the land, and Elias's routine. She listened carefully, almost gratefully, as if the steady rhythm of ranch life helped settle her thoughts. At one point, she stopped in front of the barn door, her eyes narrowing slightly. "This place feels familiar," she said. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Have you been here before?" "No," she said, shaking her head slowly. "But I feel like I've been somewhere like this. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere where people told me to listen, to follow rules, to let my mind empty." Something in her voice changed, softened, but also grew heavier. "Were you in some kind of program?" Elias asked gently. "Like a retreat or a group?" Mara blinked, surprised, as if the thought had never crossed her mind. "Maybe," she whispered. "I remember people saying things like, 'Freedom comes from letting go,' and 'the mind can be shaped.' But I don't remember where." Elias watched her carefully. He didn't want to make assumptions, but her words suggested she had been part of something unusual, maybe a strict community or a group with intense beliefs. Something that had influenced her mind deeply. They continued walking, but now Mara's steps slowed, as if her mind was working hard to pull memories into focus. Finally, she stopped under a large tree and leaned against the trunk. "Elias," she said quietly, "I think I was trying to escape something. Not something dangerous, but something controlling. Something that wanted me to think a certain way." "Were you scared?" he asked gently. "Yes," she said, "but not in the way people think. It was more like I was scared of losing myself." Her voice trembled slightly, but not out of fear, out of realization. "I think I told them I wanted freedom," she said. "But they said freedom came from letting them guide me, and I think I got confused. I think I began to believe them." Elias felt a soft ache in his chest. He didn't know what Mara had gone through, but he could see it had left deep marks, not on her body, but on her spirit. "You're safe here," he said again. "No one will guide you. No one will tell you what to think." Mara closed her eyes and breathed in slowly. She seemed to absorb his words like someone who had been thirsty for reassurance. "I want to remember everything," she whispered, "but I'm scared of what I might remember." "That's normal," Elias said. "Your mind is protecting you until you're ready." His steady tone helped her relax. She opened her eyes and looked at him with gratitude. "Thank you for not asking too many questions," she said. "Most people would push." Elias shrugged lightly. "You'll talk when you're ready. Until then, you're welcome to stay here." As they headed back toward the house, the peaceful morning began to shift. Mara suddenly paused, her eyes lifting to the long dirt road leading in from the highway. A small cloud of dust rose in the distance, the sign of a car approaching. "That's strange," Elias murmured. "I'm not expecting anyone." Mara's steps froze, her breath catching. She didn't know why. But something about that approaching car made her uneasy, as if a part of her memory recognized a shape her mind couldn't yet name. Elias noticed her stiffening and placed a calm hand on her shoulder. "It's probably nothing, just someone passing through." But Mara didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the distant dust cloud. "I don't think it's nothing," she whispered. "I think someone might be looking for me." The small cloud of dust on the road grew larger, rising gently behind the slow-moving car that approached the ranch. Mara stood still. Her breath caught somewhere between her chest and her throat. She didn't know why the sight made her uneasy. She didn't even recognize the car yet. But something deep inside her, something quiet and instinctive, told her not to move. Elias sensed the tension in her posture. He tried to stay calm. "Let's wait," he said softly. "It could just be a neighbor." But Mara didn't seem convinced. Her fingers curled slightly at her sides, and her eyes stayed focused on the car all the way until it stopped near the front gate. It was a simple, gray sedan. Nothing unusual or dramatic. But the longer Mara stared, the more she felt a quiet pressure building in her mind, as if some distant memory was pushing gently, trying to be seen. A man stepped out of the car. He was dressed neatly, casual but tidy, with a calm expression on his face. He didn't look dangerous, and he didn't rush toward the house. He simply stood there, scanning the open land before slowly approaching. Elias gave Mara a reassuring glance. "If something feels wrong, you can stay behind me." She didn't hide, but she stayed close, letting Elias take the lead as the man walked up the dirt path. When the stranger reached them, he offered a friendly smile. "Good morning," he said politely. "I'm sorry to stop by without calling ahead. I didn't expect to see anyone this early." Elias nodded but stayed cautious. "Can I help you?" "I hope so," the man replied. He glanced at Mara with a gentle curiosity. "I'm looking for someone." Mara swallowed. She felt a shiver, not fear, but recognition. Something about the man's calm tone, the way he carried himself, or maybe just the familiarity in his eyes stirred something in her memory. Elias noticed the way Mara stiffened again. "Who are you looking for?" he asked. "A woman," the man said softly. "Her name is Mara." Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at Mara, who now looked both startled and confused. The man noticed her expression. "Please," he said gently. "I don't mean to intrude. I've been searching for her because she left our group recently and I'm worried about her well-being." "Group?" Elias asked carefully. The man nodded. "Yes, we're part of a life guidance community, not a strict one, nothing controlling, just people who help each other grow. Mara joined us a few months ago." Mara felt a soft wave of memory wash through her. Faces around a table, soft music, conversations about letting go of stress, learning to trust others, finding inner balance. She remembered gentle activities, group talks, and long evenings where people shared their thoughts freely. None of it seemed alarming or harmful. She blinked and whispered, "I remember something like that." The man smiled warmly. "Yes, you were doing well. But then you left suddenly. We didn't know why. You seemed troubled." Elias listened carefully, not lowering his guard just yet. "She didn't tell me much," he said. "She's still trying to understand what happened." The man nodded sympathetically. "I understand. Sometimes when people are working through emotional growth, their minds get overwhelmed. It's normal to feel distant or confused. That's why I came. Not to take her back, only to make sure she's all right." Mara studied the man closely. His voice was calm, patient, deeply understanding, and something in his manner felt familiar, too familiar to ignore. But even with that familiarity, she felt a small tug of uncertainty in her chest, a whisper that said, "Something is missing." "I remember you," she said slowly. "I don't know your name, but I remember your voice." "My name is Adrian," he said with a gentle smile. "You used to say I reminded you of calm mornings." Mara smiled faintly, surprised by the emotional memory that rose inside her. She didn't know if she had trusted Adrian before, but the softness in his eyes made her feel like she probably had. Adrian continued, "We tried to help you explore your mind, understand what you needed, and help you find your inner strength. But sometimes the process gets overwhelming." Mara nodded slowly. "I remember feeling like I needed space, like everything was becoming too much." "Yes," Adrian said softly. "You were trying to push yourself too quickly. I think you left because your mind needed quiet. But when we realized you were missing, we feared you might be lost or hurt." Elias stepped in gently. "She's been safe here," Adrian's eyes softened with gratitude. Thank you for helping her. Mara looked down at her hands. I'm still confused about some things, she admitted. I don't know why I ended up tied near the fence. Adrian's expression didn't change sharply. Only a soft crease of concern appeared on his forehead. You sometimes practiced deep release exercises, he said gently. They involved symbolic actions, letting go of burdens or routines. Some people found peace in physical symbols. You may have tried to practice one on your own. Mara felt another wave of memory. This time, faint images of people speaking kindly. Teaching her exercises meant to help her relax and release old habits. She remembered feeling safe, supported, and encouraged. She also remembered moments when she felt emotionally strained, trying too hard to force herself into a peaceful state she wasn't ready for. Elias watched her carefully. He could tell she was trying to piece her past together, bit by bit. Adrian took a small step forward, allowing her space to decide what came next. Mara, he said softly, you're free to stay here if you want. I'm not asking you to return. I only need to know you're not alone or frightened. His tone was so gentle, so steady, that it made Mara's chest tighten with emotion, but something still tugged at her mind. Something faint, hidden just beneath the surface. I think something else happened, she said quietly. Something I can't quite remember. Adrian nodded with understanding. Sometimes memories return slowly when the mind is ready. Elias observed them silently. Adrian seemed kind and genuine. But Elias sensed that Mara's journey wasn't as simple as joining a peaceful group. Something deeper was tangled inside her. After a moment, Adrian spoke again. If you want, I can stay in town for a few days, not at your ranch, just nearby. That way, if you remember anything or need support, I can come when you're ready. Mara thought for a moment. The idea sounded comforting. She didn't feel pressured, just supported. I think that's all right, she said softly. Adrian smiled warmly. I'm glad. Please take all the time you need. He turned to Elias and offered his hand. Thank you for helping her. Truly. Elias shook his hand politely. She's safe here. Adrian nodded, then walked back to his car. He didn't speed away or act suspiciously. He simply drove off down the dirt road, leaving Mara and Elias standing quietly near the fence line. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Mara let out a slow breath. I know him, she said, but something in my memory still feels unfinished. Elias nodded. You don't have to rush it. Your mind will reveal things when it's ready. Mara looked up at him, her eyes full of confusion, hope, and a small bit of fear she couldn't explain. Elias, she whispered, what if the missing piece is something important? Then we'll face it together, Elias said gently. Mara felt a small sense of comfort, but the mystery inside her remained. Something from her past was trying to return, a memory she wasn't ready for yet. And the quiet feeling in her heart told her the missing piece wasn't gone. It was coming. The next few days passed quietly on the ranch. But the calm felt fragile, like a thin layer of dust that could be blown away with the smallest breeze. Mara tried to settle in, helping Elias with small tasks and taking slow walks around the property. She enjoyed the fresh air, the wide sky, and the gentle sounds of everyday ranch life. It all felt peaceful, but beneath her calm steps, her mind continued to shift and stir. Every night, she felt something tapping softly at her memories, urging her to remember something important. She didn't know if that missing piece would comfort her or trouble her, but she could feel that it was getting closer, like a slow sunrise waiting behind the horizon. Elias kept a close but respectful eye on her. Some moments, she seemed almost back to herself, smiling, asking questions, talking freely. Then suddenly, a quiet thought would take her away again, leaving her expression distant, her eyes staring into a place only she could see. One afternoon, Mara stood near the porch railing, watching the wind move through the tall grass. Elias walked out holding 2 glasses of lemonade. "You look deep in thought," he said gently, handing her a glass. She accepted it with a small smile. "I'm trying to listen to my memories," she said softly. "They talk to me like tiny whispers. I hear almost everything, but not the last part." Elias nodded. "Maybe the last part is taking time because it's sensitive." Mara looked down at her hands. "That's what I'm scared of. What if it's something that changes everything?" "Then it's better to remember it in your own time," he replied. Mara appreciated that he never pressured her. She had met people before who pushed others to talk or open up, even when they weren't ready. Elias, on the other hand, offered space, warmth, and steady reassurance. It made the ranch feel like a safe island in the middle of a confusing sea. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Mara noticed a small envelope on the porch table. Her name was written on it in neat handwriting. She recognized the handwriting immediately, Adrian's. Inside was a simple note. "I hope you're doing well. I'm nearby if you need help remembering anything. Only reach out if you feel ready." Mara read the note slowly. Something about Adrian's kindness comforted her, yet something else about his message stirred a small uneasiness. Not fear, just a gentle tug of something unresolved. That night, she lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. Her mind drifted between memories and new thoughts. She remembered group conversations, peaceful exercises, long talks with Adrian, and moments of comfort. But she also remembered quiet pressure, words spoken softly but with a sense of direction behind them. She remembered being encouraged to let go of her thoughts, to trust others more, to lean into guidance. None of it was harmful, but something about it now felt incomplete. The next morning, Mara stepped outside and found Elias fixing a fence rail. She walked toward him, her steps small but determined. "I think I want to talk to Adrian," she said. Elias looked up calmly. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said. "I feel like he knows part of my story, and if I want to understand everything, I should talk to him." Elias wiped his hands on a cloth and nodded. "I can drive you to town." "Thank you." The small town was quiet, with only a few people walking along the sidewalks. The morning breeze carried the scent of coffee from a local cafe. Adrian had told Mara where he was staying, the only small inn in town. When they arrived, Adrian was sitting on a bench outside reading a book. He looked up when he saw them and gave a gentle smile. "Mara," he said warmly, "I'm glad you came." She sat beside him while Elias stayed nearby but didn't hover. Mara took a deep breath. "Adrian, I need to understand everything. I remember some of the community, the peaceful talks, but something still feels missing." Adrian nodded slowly, closing his book. "I thought this might happen. Memories sometimes return in pieces. What would you like to know?" "I want to know why I left," she said simply. Adrian's eyes softened, and he looked down at his hands for a moment before answering. "You left because you felt overwhelmed. You always tried to excel, to follow every instruction perfectly. You wanted to improve quickly, maybe too quickly. I think you put too much pressure on yourself." Mara listened quietly. "You told us you needed space," Adrian continued. "You said you needed fresh air, time alone, and distance from group thinking. We respected that. But then you disappeared, and we became worried." Mara considered his words. They sounded sincere. She remembered moments where she tried too hard, pushing herself to meet expectations, her own and those she believed others had for her. "But why did I feel like something was wrong?" she asked softly. Adrian paused thoughtfully. "Because you were changing, and change can feel confusing. You were learning to see yourself differently. Sometimes that feels like you're losing yourself, even when you're actually growing." Mara breathed slowly, taking in his explanation. It felt true, but it still didn't fill the missing space in her mind. "Is there anything else I should know?" she asked. Adrian hesitated for a brief second. It was so subtle that even Elias, watching from a distance, barely noticed it. Finally, Adrian said, "There is one thing. You were very close to finishing a big step in your personal development. You were proud, but also afraid of what it meant. I think that fear is what made you leave suddenly." Mara frowned softly. "I don't remember the big step." Adrian smiled kindly. "It's all right. You will when you're ready." Mara appreciated his patience, but something still felt like a puzzle missing its final piece. After talking for a while, she stood up. "Thank you, Adrian," she said. "I think I understand more now." Adrian nodded. "Whenever you feel ready to remember the rest, you know where to find me." As they walked back to the truck, Elias looked at her gently. "How do you feel?" "More clear," she said, "but not complete." "Do you trust him?" Elias asked softly. Mara paused. "I think I trust his intentions, but something inside me still feels like a curtain is half open." Elias nodded. "Sometimes clarity comes slowly." That evening, Mara and Elias returned to the ranch. The sunset painted the sky in soft pink and orange colors, wrapping the land in a warm glow. Mara stepped onto the porch and took a deep breath, feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. Later, after dinner, she sat alone by the window. She watched the last light fade from the sky and felt the missing memory tug at her again, stronger this time. Suddenly, she felt a flicker, like a small flash of a forgotten moment. People sitting in a circle, Adrian speaking softly, a sentence repeated by everyone. A gentle instruction encouraging her to let go of her past completely. Encouragement to trust the group more than her own doubts. She blinked. It wasn't frightening. Just surprising. She whispered to herself, "That's what I forgot." She remembered now that she had started to feel like her voice was blending with the voices of others. Even peaceful guidance could feel heavy when she needed to think more independently. That realization opened another memory, her sitting alone, thinking she needed space and clarity on her own terms. She had walked away to find herself again. Elias walked into the room quietly. "You remembered something?" "Yes," Mara said softly. "I remembered that I needed freedom not from anyone, but from losing my own thoughts." Elias nodded gently. "That makes sense." Mara looked out the window again. "There's still more to remember, but now I know I left because I wanted to hear my own voice again." "And you will," Elias said. For the first time since arriving, Mara felt a soft sense of calm. The truth wasn't frightening. It was simply a reminder that growth sometimes needed solitude. But she knew there was still one final piece of the story waiting to rise from the shadows of her mind. The days that followed felt calmer for Mara, but also strangely meaningful, as if each new sunrise brought her a little closer to the truth inside her mind. She spent time walking around the ranch, reading small books Elias kept on his shelf, and helping him with light chores whenever she could. She wasn't fully herself yet, but she felt stronger, more present, and more aware of her feelings. Elias noticed the change, too. Sometimes he would watch her quietly from a distance, seeing how she looked at the open land, how she breathed in the fresh air, how her shoulders relaxed more each day. He didn't say it out loud, but he felt proud of her progress. She had gone from confused and fragile to calm and thoughtful. She was still searching for something, but the search no longer looked painful. It looked hopeful. One morning, she sat on the porch alone with a cup of warm tea in her hands. The soft morning light made the world look gentle. She closed her eyes and listened to the breeze. It felt like the right moment. The right moment to let the final memory come. And slowly, it did. It didn't arrive like a sudden shock or a dramatic flash. Instead, it came softly, like a gentle wave touching the shore. She saw herself sitting alone in her old room, back in the life guidance community. Not frightened, not upset, but thoughtful. She remembered feeling that she was beginning to rely too much on the group's words. She remembered wanting to find her own ideas, her own feelings, her own direction. She remembered quietly packing a small bag. She remembered writing a letter saying she needed time for herself. She remembered stepping outside, breathing deeply, and walking toward the road by herself. She had left on purpose. Not because she was pressured, not because she was chased, and not because she was confused. She had left because she wanted to find her own balance, without noise, without guidance, without expectations. Mara opened her eyes slowly. The memory felt complete now, soft but clear. Elias stepped outside at that moment, wiping his hands on a cloth. He noticed her calm expression and walked toward her. "You look like someone who just found an answer," he said kindly. Mara smiled, small but peaceful. "I did. Do you want to talk about it?" She nodded. "I remembered everything, or at least everything that matters." Elias pulled up a chair beside her and sat quietly, letting her set the pace. She took a deep breath. "I left the community because I wanted to think clearly again. I wasn't scared of them. I wasn't unhappy. I just felt like I needed to hear my own thoughts more clearly." "That sounds like a strong decision," Elias said. Mara nodded slowly. "It was. But I think I pushed myself too hard. I wanted answers too quickly. I kept walking for hours, maybe even a whole day. And then I became too tired, too confused. My mind felt cloudy, like it couldn't hold all the new thoughts at once." She paused, remembering the weight she felt on that long walk. "I tied my hands only lightly," she said softly. "It wasn't to hurt myself or anything like that. It was part of a symbolic exercise I learned. Something meant to represent letting go of old patterns. But I think I was too tired to understand what I was doing clearly." Elias listened with patience, never interrupting. "I sat down near your fence because I couldn't walk anymore," she continued. "And then everything became blurry. When I woke up, you were there." Elias nodded gently. "And I'm glad I was." Mara felt her heart warm at his words. "When Adrian came, I thought he might hold the missing piece. But the memory wasn't with him. It was with me. It was the choice I made to leave and find myself again." Elias smiled. "Then it sounds like you found what you were looking for." Mara looked out at the open land. "I think I did. And I also found something I wasn't expecting." "What's that?" Elias asked. "A reminder that kindness exists in strangers," she said. "That sometimes the safest place is the one you never planned to find." Elias looked touched. He didn't think of himself as someone special. He simply helped her because it felt like the right thing to do. "So," he said carefully, "what do you want to do next?" Mara took a moment to think. She wasn't rushing anymore. Her answer came from a quiet, honest place inside her. "I want to return to the community. But not to stay forever," she said. "Just to close the chapter. To tell them I'm okay. To let them know I left because I needed space, not because something went wrong." "That sounds wise," Elias said. "But," she added softly, "I don't want to leave this ranch too quickly. It gave me the space I needed. You gave me the space I needed. Elias smiled warmly. You're welcome to stay as long as you want. Mara felt grateful, truly grateful. She had been lost not because of danger, but because she was overwhelmed by too many emotions. The ranch had become a quiet place where she could breathe again. The next day, Adrian visited the ranch one more time. He stood outside with a gentle expression as Mara approached him. I remember everything now, she said softly. Adrian nodded. I'm glad. She explained her memories to him, the reasons she left, and the calm she found on the ranch. He listened with understanding, his expression thoughtful. You did the right thing, Adrian said. Every person needs personal space to grow. I'm proud of you for realizing that. Mara felt relieved. Adrian then smiled kindly. Whenever you want to visit, the community will welcome you, but you don't have to come back if you feel your path is leading somewhere else. Thank you, she said sincerely. After Adrian left, Mara and Elias walked back toward the house. Do you think you'll go back soon? Elias asked. Not yet, Mara said. I think my journey isn't finished. I want to learn more about myself here first. Elias nodded. Then that's what you should do. As the days continued, Mara settled into a new rhythm. She helped with morning chores, read books, sat under the large tree with a notebook, and wrote down all the thoughts she once felt too rushed to understand. Slowly, she began to rebuild her sense of self, piece by piece, gently, without pressure. She found joy in simple things, the sound of rain on the roof, the warmth of sunlight on her face, the soft whinny of horses in the early morning. Each small moment reminded her that peace wasn't something to be taught. It was something to be discovered within. One evening, as she and Elias sat on the porch watching the stars, she whispered, I think I finally understand what freedom means. Elias turned to her. What does it mean to you? It means finding yourself, she said softly, even if you have to get lost first. Elias smiled, and the warm night breeze carried her words into the quiet sky. Mara wasn't confused anymore. She wasn't searching for missing memories. She wasn't afraid of her past or unsure of her future. She was simply herself, calmer, stronger, and finally whole. And she knew that whatever path she chose next, the ranch would always be the place where she found her way back to her own voice.